The Pages Between Worlds. Chapter 1, The Whispering Library. I had visited the old library countless times before, but something was different that day. The air was hushed, as if holding its breath. Dust hung like silken threads in golden rays of sunlight that poured through the high arched windows. The scent of old paper and polished wood lingered, wrapping around me like a familiar song. Every step I took echoed softly across the marble floor, and the sound seemed to dissolve before reaching the towering bookshelves. My fingers trailed the spines of worn volumes, each one humming faintly under my touch. Some were leather-bound and cracked, others smooth and wrapped in fabrics faded with time. I was not searching for anything in particular, but rather letting the shelves decide where my thoughts should wander. And then, tucked behind a row of encyclopedias on a shelf I swear had never been there before, I saw it. The book. It didn't belong. Its cover was unlike anything else in the room, soft, dark leather etched with winding golden vines, almost glowing in the dim light. There was no title, no author's name. Just a presence. A wait. As if it had been waiting, not forgotten but kept, hidden away until I arrived. I reached out and touched it. The moment my skin met the leather, I felt a subtle vibration, like the tremor of a distant bell. It wasn't loud or sharp, it was soothing, like the first few notes of a lullaby. I slid it gently from the shelf, brushing away a thin veil of dust, and held it close. The weight in my hands was comforting, like the feeling of holding a steaming mug on a cold morning. I made my way to the reading alcove at the far end of the library, where a large bay window framed the drifting clouds outside. The light filtering through painted the room in hues of amber and rose. I settled into the velvet cushioned chair, tucking my legs beneath me, and placed the book on the low wooden table. I hesitated. I don't know why. It felt like opening this book would change something, not in the world, but in me. When I finally did, the pages made no sound. They parted like breath, revealing lines of ink that shimmered and twisted, as though alive. The text was written in a language I couldn't recognize, but somehow understood, each word blooming in my mind like a flower opening slowly in the sun. And then, the world shifted. It wasn't abrupt. There was no jolt, no falling. It felt instead like exhaling, like letting go of everything held tight. My surroundings faded, the library melting into colors and light, until I was standing barefoot on soft, sun-warmed grass. The meadow stretched endlessly in all directions, rolling hills covered in pale purple wildflowers that whispered as they swayed. The sky was a watercolor of soft blue and gentle lavender, with clouds that moved so slowly they seemed frozen. I turned around. There was no trace of the library, no door, no book. Only the gentle rustling of leaves and the far-off call of a bird I couldn't see. I walked. Not with purpose, but with curiosity, as if each step was being written just ahead of me. The ground beneath my feet hummed gently, the earth pulsing in a rhythm I could feel in my chest. I passed a tree with bark like silk, its leaves translucent and glowing faintly from within. When I touched one, it made a soft chime, like wind through glass. I realized I wasn't just in the book, I was the book. The story wasn't being told to me, it was being lived by me. As I wandered, I found a brook that sang as it flowed. The water was clearer than any I'd ever seen, and as I knelt to drink from it, I saw not my reflection, but a series of images, snapshots of moments I hadn't yet lived. Me, walking through a city of lanterns. Me, floating above a forest of whispering trees. Me, staring into a mirror made of light. I sat on a smooth stone at the brook's edge and watched the scenes drift by. There was no urgency, no need to move on. Time here was like syrup, thick, slow, and sweet. I could have stayed for hours, or perhaps I already had. Eventually, a soft breeze nudged me forward. I followed it through the meadow, past clusters of soft creatures with glowing eyes who watched me without fear. They didn't speak, but I felt their welcome, like the warmth of a fire gently radiating outward. One of them walked beside me for a while, a four-legged thing with fur like mist and a tail that flickered like candlelight. It didn't guide me, but its presence made the journey feel less solitary. We came upon a gate woven from vines, suspended in the middle of nothing, no fence, no walls, just a gate, hanging quietly between two birch trees. I hesitated. Beyond it, I could see a garden, its flowers opening and closing in rhythm with an unseen breath. I reached for the gate, and as my hand touched it, I heard a voice. It wasn't outside me, but inside. Soft, ancient, and kind. You are the reader, and now, the written. Every turn of the page is a step, every word a breath. This is not a place to understand. It is a place to feel. The gate creaked open, and the creature beside me stopped. It looked up at me with eyes like pools of reflected moonlight, and then slowly turned away, disappearing into the field. I stepped through the gate and into the garden. Inside, time seemed to slow further, to stretch and settle like fog. The flowers glowed in soft colors, bluebells that pulsed like heartbeats, tulips that whispered in harmony, roses that opened only when I passed. There were no paths, only patterns in the grass, looping and curling in gentle spirals. I followed them, letting my feet guide me. At the garden's center was a small stone pedestal. Resting atop it, another book. This one was different. Its cover was pale, almost translucent, and warm to the touch. When I opened it, there were no words, just images, moving slowly like reflections in a pond. I watched, and the world around me changed again. I felt no fear, no tension. Only the softness of knowing I was safe, wrapped in the quiet rhythm of story. And as the scene faded once more, and the garden blurred into gentle color, I felt myself drifting, not away, but deeper. Into the pages, into the tale, into the peace of being nowhere and everywhere all at once. Chapter 2, A Garden Where Time Stands Still. The garden I stepped into was unlike anything I had ever imagined. Its silence was profound, not empty, but full of presence. A silence that felt alive, as if it held every sound that had ever been spoken, every whisper that had ever passed through lips now long forgotten. It welcomed me with stillness, not expecting anything in return. I stood for a while, not moving, letting the atmosphere wrap itself around me like a cloak. The air was warm, scented with something like jasmine and old parchment, a fragrance both comforting and unfamiliar. Above me, the sky no longer held a sun, but a soft, ambient glow, as if light had decided to exist without a source. The shadows were gentle and indistinct, like the edges of a fading memory. Flowers bloomed around me in gentle spirals, roses that shimmered with a faint blue sheen, daisies that floated an inch above the soil, and strange blossoms with petals like silk ribbons that curled and uncurled as though breathing. There were trees, too, tall and wide, with bark that pulsed faintly, almost like a heartbeat. One tree had leaves shaped like tiny hands, reaching downward, as if trying to offer comfort or ask for company. I began to walk, slowly. Not because I needed to get anywhere, but because the garden itself seemed to invite motion. Every step I took was met with a soft glow from the grass beneath my feet, as if the earth was responding with gratitude. I noticed that my footsteps made no sound. There was no crunch, no rustle, only the gentle motion of moving through a place where time had stopped caring. A dragonfly floated past me, its wings made not of chitin, but of glass, each beat leaving behind a shimmer in the air that faded slowly, like the last note of a lullaby. It circled me once, then continued its aimless drift, unbothered by my presence. In the distance, I saw a small structure, almost hidden by flowering vines. It looked like a gazebo, though its roof was made of overlapping petals, and its columns were twisted like the trunks of young trees. I approached it, curiosity guiding me gently. Inside, there was a single wooden chair, aged but sturdy, and covered in moss so soft it looked like a cushion. I sat. The chair embraced me gently, the wood warming instantly to my body. In front of me, a table carved from stone, smooth and pale, and atop it, another book. This one had a cover made of living leaves, woven together in an intricate braid. It pulsed faintly beneath my fingers as I picked it up, warm and rhythmic like a resting heart. I didn't hesitate this time. I opened it, and once again, the ink shimmered and curled into shapes I could feel more than see. But this time, I didn't leave. The garden remained around me. The book was not pulling me into a new place, it was drawing the world within it to me. Around the gazebo, the air began to shimmer, and slowly, new forms took shape. Gentle hills rolled in from the horizon. Trees grew in reverse, uncoiling from the earth upward. A pond formed near my feet, the water settling as if it had always been there. Fireflies blinked into existence, each light pulsing in time with the rhythm of my breath. I watched as a bridge of woven branches extended from the gazebo across the pond. It curved delicately, barely brushing the water's surface. I stood and walked toward it, not hurried, my steps slow and measured. The bridge did not sway, it welcomed me with the grace of something built for one. At the other end was a door. Just a door, freestanding, unsupported, its frame made of smooth stone and glass that rippled like water. There was no wall, no handle. Just the shape of passage. I reached out and placed my palm flat against its surface. A warmth spread up my arm, gentle and tingling, like the sensation of remembering a dream just before it fades. The door opened inward without a sound, revealing not a room, but a sky full of stars. And I stepped through. Now I was floating, not falling, not flying, just being. The stars moved slowly around me, as if suspended in syrup. Each one flickered with a rhythm all its own, like countless tiny lanterns swaying in a nighttime breeze. They were close enough to touch, and I did, reaching out to brush the edge of one that glowed a soft rose gold. It hummed beneath my touch and sang a note that resonated in my chest. As I drifted, I saw constellations I had never known, shapes of things not from any world I'd visited, but from stories not yet written. A sleeping whale curled into a moon. A tree growing upside down, its roots tangled in stars. A clock made of feathers and wind. Each cluster of stars whispered to me in languages I didn't understand but instinctively recognized. They weren't giving me information. They were giving me feeling. I closed my eyes, and the stars began to fade, not disappearing, but folding themselves away like a page turning slowly. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in the garden. But it had changed. Everything was more vivid now, more real and yet more dreamlike. The flowers glowed softly, and the trees leaned toward me as if they remembered me from another life. The air was thicker, like mist wrapped in memory. I felt no fear, no urgency. Only a deep sense of being exactly where I was meant to be. The gazebo was gone, replaced by a circle of stones that pulsed in warm light. In the center of the stones, the book rested once more, open now, its pages fluttering gently even without wind. I sat beside it and watched. The ink shifted and moved, forming not words, but shapes, leaves, stars, lanterns, bridges, all the things I had seen. And one final image, a path leading onward, curling into a spiral that disappeared into a new page. I knew, without being told, that the story would continue. That the garden was only one part of something much larger, something waiting just beyond the next word. And as I lay back in the grass, watching the sky begin to shimmer again, I felt myself settle, my thoughts growing slower, my breath falling into the rhythm of the garden. No need for questions, no need for answers. Only the quiet unfolding of a story still being told. Chapter 3, A Town Made of Lanterns. The path unfolded gently before me, like a ribbon unrolling in slow motion. I didn't rise from the grass in the garden, rather, the world around me shifted while I remained still. It was as if the garden quietly stepped aside to make room for the next part of the story. Colors deepened. The air grew cooler, kissed with the scent of paper, wax, and something faintly floral. A dim orange glow appeared in the distance, blinking slowly like a lighthouse calling to lost ships. I stood, though I didn't remember making the decision. My feet moved on their own, soft against the earth, and the stones beneath me pulsed like a heartbeat shared with the land. As I walked, the air thickened with a golden haze. The scent of lantern oil mingled with something sweet, like honey mixed with the faintest trace of cinnamon. The path led me into the town, if it could be called that. There were no streets in the traditional sense, no cobblestone or asphalt, only walkways made of parchment, etched faintly with calligraphy that glowed underfoot. The buildings weren't made of brick or wood but of folded silk and rice paper, standing impossibly tall and delicate, their forms swaying gently as if breathing. Above me, thousands of lanterns floated in the air, round ones, long ones, some shaped like fish or birds or blossoms. They drifted silently in slow, measured circles. Each one emitted a soft glow, their colors shifting slowly from amber to peach to pale rose and back again. Together, they lit the entire town in a soft, dreamlike twilight. There were no sounds of conversation, no footsteps but mine, no bustle or movement save for the lantern's quiet sway. The silence here was gentle, almost reverent, like walking into a library made of moonlight. I wandered. Each building pulsed faintly, as though alive, and as I passed, I could sense each one watching me, not with eyes, but with something deeper, something like memory. In the window of a house shaped like a lotus flower, I saw a reflection of myself, reading a book by a fire, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. In another, shaped like a tower of stacked teacups, I saw myself walking through a forest of glowing mushrooms. These were not memories. Not mine, at least. They were possible versions of me, flickering in and out of view, each one existing within the pages of a different book. It occurred to me that this town might be built from the stories themselves, the lanterns, the buildings, the walkways all stitched together from the worlds readers had visited and left behind. The realization did not startle me. It warmed me, like recognizing the handwriting of an old friend. At the heart of the town stood a circular plaza. In the center, a small fountain shaped like an open book trickled water that glowed faintly. Around the edges of the plaza were stalls, not shops, not markets, but stations of stillness. Each stall held a single object on display, a worn compass, a music box with no key, a bell that didn't ring, a shoe made of sea glass. Objects that held stories without telling them. I was drawn to one stall in particular, where a lantern larger than the others sat upon a velvet cushion. It was deep green, shaped like a leaf, and inside flickered a slow, gentle light. As I approached, the lantern opened slightly, and a slip of paper floated out. I caught it without effort. The moment my fingers touched the paper, words appeared, not written, but felt. This one is yours. You've been here before. Not in body, but in wonder. I folded the paper and placed it in my pocket. The lantern gave a soft hum and closed again, its light dimming slightly as if content. Beyond the plaza was a narrow alley lit by tiny pinprick stars embedded in the walls. As I walked through it, the alley opened into a courtyard, and there, before me, stood a library. But not like the one I had found the book in. This library had no walls. It was built entirely of suspended pages, held together by invisible threads. The pages fluttered in the air but never drifted away. The ceiling was made of bookmarks woven into constellations, and the floor beneath my feet shimmered like ink freshly spilled. There were no doors. Just a threshold of golden light. I stepped through. Inside, the air was thick with story. I could feel it in my lungs, the way you can feel music when it's loud enough. There were no librarians, no patrons. Just shelves, shelves that curled like vines, looped like rivers, extended up and up into a sky I could not see. Each shelf held only a few books, but each one hummed with quiet power. I reached for one at random. Its spine was warm to the touch. As I opened it, I found not words but motion, small images drifting across the pages, like shadows cast by dreams. I watched myself walking through a rainstorm made of petals, another self sailing through clouds on a ship with wings. Then I found another book, this one bound in soft velvet, the color of midnight. I opened it. The world around me pulsed once, gently. The shelves began to glow, and I felt something shift in the air. It wasn't like the other transitions. This time, I wasn't being drawn somewhere new. I was being visited. The lanterns from the sky outside began to drift inward, slowly descending into the library, their soft glows lighting the space in warm halos. They didn't bump into shelves or books. They knew exactly where to go. Each lantern hovered over a different book, casting light that seemed to awaken the stories within. The pages turned themselves, revealing more living images, more memories that weren't quite mine. I understood, then. This was not just a library. It was a living archive, of every story I had ever imagined, every path I had never taken, every version of myself that could have been written into existence. And this was only one layer. In the center of the library, a large circular table sat beneath a suspended orb of dim silver light. Upon the table, a single book waited for me. Its cover was mirrored, and as I approached, my reflection became visible, not entirely accurate, but softened, dreamlike, like seeing myself through someone else's eyes. I opened the book. This time, there were words. Just a few. Where you go next is not decided. The path is yours to turn. Pages wait to be filled. I closed the book gently. Around me, the lanterns began to rise again, slowly drifting back through the air, finding their places in the sky beyond the library. I stepped out of the library and back into the town. It had changed. Not in appearance, but in sensation. It no longer felt like I was passing through. It felt like I had added something to it, one more light, one more thread in the weave. The lanterns above twinkled with slightly more warmth, as if grateful. As if recognizing me not just as a visitor, but as a contributor. I walked toward the edge of the town, where the parchment path resumed. It curled outward like the tail of a sentence unfinished. I looked back once. The town stood still, glowing, eternal. A place made of stories, sustained by wanderers like me. Then I turned forward and stepped into the next chapter, where the sky was beginning to shift and the air smelled faintly of salt and clouds. Chapter 4: The Sea Beneath the Floor. I didn't feel myself walking anymore. The world flowed around me as if I were being carried, not on water or wind, but by the gentle progression of the story itself. The path beneath my feet, once parchment, gave way to something more delicate, clear, crystalline panels that glistened underfoot. I looked down, and gasped, not in fear or surprise, but in the kind of reverence one feels before something vast and unknowable. Beneath the floor, a sea stretched into forever. It wasn't dark, nor cold. The water was luminous, glowing with a deep, quiet blue, pulsing like the breath of a sleeping world. Schools of gentle fish passed beneath me, their bodies trailing silvery light in intricate patterns, like calligraphy written on silk. Some swam in slow loops, others drifted in long lines that curved like soft waves. Their movements were hypnotic, too smooth to belong to anything bound by gravity or time. Above me, the air was still. The sky, if it could still be called that, was hidden, replaced by soft cloud-like mists that drifted just above my head. Each cloud sparkled with particles of light, like dust motes caught in late sunlight. They moved slowly, rhythmically, as if responding to the sea below. The walkway beneath me did not creak or sway. It remained perfectly stable, inviting me to take my time. I did. There was no reason to rush. With every step, the panels shifted ever so slightly in hue, responding to the world beneath. When I paused to kneel and press my palm to the surface, the fish beneath me gathered, forming spirals and rings, as if curious. They shimmered together like an underwater constellation. There were no other structures, no buildings or signs. Only the walkway, the sea below, and the air that felt more like a whisper than wind. Eventually, the path widened into a platform. It floated above a coral reef that glowed like a field of stars, swaying gently under invisible tides. In the center of the platform stood a pedestal, simple, made of smooth white stone that reflected the colors of the sea below. Resting upon it was another book. This one was bound not in leather or paper, but in glass-like shell, faintly iridescent. Its surface caught the light and scattered it in soft rainbows. When I picked it up, it was warm to the touch, humming faintly with something familiar, like a lullaby I had heard only in dreams. I opened it without hesitation. There were no pages. Instead, the moment it parted, the platform beneath me became translucent, and the sea below grew brighter. Light poured upward, not harshly, but with the grace of candle flames rising. Shapes emerged within the sea, not just fish, but vast creatures, gentle and slow, their eyes filled with an ancient calm. They looked up toward me, acknowledging my presence without expectation. One of them surfaced. It was enormous, like a manta ray made of flowing silk, its wings trailing light like the tails of comets. Its body shimmered with symbols, not etched but alive, swimming across its surface like words that refused to settle. It paused directly beneath me, its eyes locking with mine through the transparent floor. I heard nothing. And yet, I understood. It wasn't speaking in words, but in sensations: safety, welcome, stillness, return. It drifted slowly, then rolled over, revealing its underbelly, a map made of shifting currents and floating lanterns. As I watched, I recognized some of the symbols: the meadow of the first world, the garden of time, the town of lanterns. Lines connected them, not straight, but curved like the flow of breath. And at the center of it all, a glowing point pulsed gently, just once, then dimmed. The creature sank again into the sea, disappearing into a spiral of bioluminescent mist. I stood still for a long time, watching the ripples fade. I closed the book. The pedestal faded away, its purpose complete. The platform remained, but now it began to drift, as if the story was being carried onward not by choice, but by rhythm. I let it take me. I lay down gently on the cool glass, watching the sea below and the soft clouds above. Hours might have passed. Or none at all. Eventually, I noticed that stars were appearing in the mists above, real stars, or at least, reflections of them. They shimmered like points of memory, distant and delicate. They didn't twinkle, they pulsed. Each one gave off a soft sound, like a bell rung from across a great distance. Not loud. Just enough to feel. And then I realized the platform was rising. Slowly, gently, almost imperceptibly. The sea began to fall away beneath me, and the sky above thickened with starlight. The book I still held grew warmer, its shell glowing with a soft golden light. I looked at it. Its cover now bore a symbol, a spiral surrounded by lanterns. It had changed. And when I opened it once more, I saw that the pages had returned, blank at first, then slowly filling with writing. But not mine. Not someone else's either. It was the story itself, continuing on its own. You are the one who opens, not closes. The sea has shown you not where you are, but what you carry. Memory, possibility, quiet. As I read, the stars above me drew closer. One by one, they descended like floating feathers, brushing against my skin and dissolving. Each one carried with it a single word I could not keep, only feel. Rest. Softness. Drift. Wonder. When I could no longer tell whether I was lying on a floor or floating in the air, the book closed gently on its own. The light around me dimmed, but not into darkness, just into peace. There was no door this time, no path to follow. Just a soft unfolding, like a curtain drawn aside to reveal the next scene. And as I drifted forward, the last thing I saw was my own reflection, calm, quiet, eyes half closed, not sleeping, but resting within the story, as part of it, not apart from it. Chapter 5: The Mirror of Forgotten Names. I found myself in a room made of silence. It wasn't dark, light glowed softly from all directions, though I couldn't see a source. There were no walls at first, only a faint boundary made of mist, curling inward and out like a slow breath. The floor beneath me was smooth and cool, made of polished stone that reflected not my shape, but shifting patterns of light and shadow. I stood still for a long moment, trying to sense where I had arrived. The world felt thinner here, as if I stood between pages, inside the very pause between thoughts. There was no sound, not even the quiet hum that had followed me through the other worlds. Only stillness. And then the mist receded. Walls emerged around me, mirrors. Not sharp, silvered ones, but soft and rippling like the surface of a pond. Each panel reflected something, though not always me. Some showed me reading by candlelight. Others displayed images of rooms I didn't recognize but felt somehow drawn to, a wooden cabin covered in ivy, a tower made of glass, a library buried beneath snow. I walked slowly, running my fingers gently across the glass. The reflections did not ripple at my touch. Instead, they deepened, drawing me closer. In one mirror, I saw myself as a child, sitting under a willow tree, reading a book whose pages turned themselves. In another, I stood alone in a snow-covered field, watching paper birds fly overhead. And then I saw something different. A mirror that held no reflection. I stepped in front of it, expecting to see nothing. But slowly, faint outlines began to form, words. Names. Dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Each name shimmered faintly, written in handwriting I recognized but couldn't place. As I watched, a name lit up, brighter than the rest. My own. Not spoken, not called, but remembered. And below it, another name I didn't know. Then another. And another. Names I'd never heard, but which stirred something deep in me, like forgotten dreams, or people met only once in passing and never again. The mirror pulsed gently, and I felt it then, not just memory, but the presence of everyone who had ever read the same stories I had. The people who had opened the same books, imagined the same skies, walked the same lantern-lit paths. This was not just a room of mirrors. It was a room of echoes. Each name a story. Each reflection a chapter. I continued walking. The mirrors began to curve inward, forming a spiral that drew me deeper into the space. Some mirrors now reflected not just places or people, but emotions, moments of peace, sorrow, joy, even wonder. I saw myself laughing under a falling sky of stars. Crying beside a river that sang my name. Sitting in silence in a house that had no walls. I didn't remember living those moments. But I felt that I had. At the center of the spiral, a tall, narrow mirror stood alone. Its surface was still, silver blue, and unlike the others, it did not ripple or pulse. I approached it slowly, feeling something shift with every step, like walking into a memory that wasn't mine, but one I had promised to carry. When I stood before it, the mirror shimmered, and I saw me. Just me. But not quite as I was. My hair moved gently, though there was no breeze. My eyes were soft, half-lidded, like one who has just woken from a dream and is not yet ready to let it go. The mirror me smiled. Not a wide smile, but a quiet one, like the curve of a crescent moon. And then, it raised a hand. I mirrored the gesture. Our fingers met, mine against glass, theirs against light. The moment they touched, warmth flooded through me. Not heat, but memory. Not sharp or painful, but slow and thick, like honey moving through a jar. Visions poured into me. Me writing a letter and tucking it into a tree knot. Me listening to the sound of wind through a harp strung between trees. Me carrying a lantern made of woven thoughts, lighting the way for someone I could not see. And one final image. Me, sitting in a chair, back in the first library, holding a book that shimmered faintly. The pages open. The words unwritten. I blinked, and the mirror faded. Where it had stood, a small stone table now emerged. On it, another book, this one unlike any I had seen. Its cover was mirrored, yes, but also liquid. Like it might ripple at any moment and reveal something hidden beneath. I picked it up. The moment I did, the world around me quieted even further, if that was possible. The mirrors stilled. The mist held its breath. I opened the book. But there were no words. Just blank pages. And then, one word appeared, ink blooming like a drop of dye in water. Remember. Another followed. Even what you never knew. Even who you never were. All of it is part of you. The mirrors around me shimmered. Slowly, the names reappeared, not just names, but titles. The girl who drew rainbows in the sky. The one who carried the last memory. The wanderer of 5 suns. Each one a story. A self. A version. I stood surrounded by selves I had never lived but which lived within me. And I felt whole. Not complete, there was still so much unwritten. But whole, in a way that had nothing to do with endings. I closed the book. The room responded. The mist rose again, not as a curtain, but as a gentle tide. It swept up the mirrors, the names, the reflections, folding them gently into itself like pages returning to a book. The light softened to a dim golden hue, like dusk settling over a quiet village. The table faded. The floor dissolved. And I was standing once more on a path, not of parchment, or glass, or light, but of soft sand. Ahead of me, the sky turned to deep lavender. I walked forward, still holding the mirrored book in my hands. The sea whispered behind me, though I could no longer see it. The lanterns glowed faintly in the corners of my vision. And the names echoed gently inside me, like wind through leaves that had yet to fall. I did not know where the next step would lead. But I trusted the story to unfold, slowly, gently, like a petal opening to the light. And I was ready to turn the page. Chapter 6, The Book That Reads Me. The sand beneath my feet was soft and warm, though the sky above had turned a gentle shade of indigo. A calm, constant breeze stirred the horizon, and somewhere nearby, I heard the hush of water lapping at the shore. Though I had left the mirror room behind, the names, the reflections, and the silence still lived within me. They moved with me now, quietly, gently, like a well-loved melody that one hums without noticing. The path stretched ahead, winding along the coast of a sea that seemed to fade into the sky. There was no line where ocean ended and clouds began, they met in colors too subtle to name. I walked slowly, holding the mirrored book close, though it no longer felt like an object I carried. It felt more like something I was becoming part of. With every step, it pulsed faintly in my hands, as though syncing itself with the rhythm of my breath. After some time, though time was meaningless now, I saw it. A small wooden chair. It sat alone on the beach, turned toward the sea, its silhouette etched gently against the horizon. No table, no books, no structures. Just a chair. And it was waiting. I approached it slowly, more reverently than I had approached anything in this journey. When I reached it, I paused, then gently lowered myself into the seat. The wood was warm, shaped perfectly to support me, not as a reader, not even as a traveler, but simply as one who is. For a while, I watched the sea. Or perhaps, it watched me. Waves came and went without sound, like the world breathing softly around me. Each ripple shimmered with faint echoes, scenes I had lived, or might have lived, or had only dreamt of. I saw the meadow with its pastel sky, the silver-leaf tree that chimed like bells, the lantern town suspended in eternal twilight, the sea of mirrored names, and countless other fragments that didn't belong to any single place. They rose from the water like reflections on glass, lingered, and dissolved. The book in my lap opened of its own accord. I didn't look down at first. I waited, not knowing what I was waiting for. Then, slowly, my eyes fell to the pages. There were words now. Not written in ink, but shaped from the sea's reflections, the air's hum, and the soft weight of memory. They were about me. I saw my own footsteps described, each step I had taken since the first moment I found the book in the whispering library. Every turn, every moment of stillness, every image reflected in the mirrors or cast by the lanterns was recorded here. Not just as events, but as emotions. As textures. As presence. You sat beneath the tree and let its silver leaves sing. You met yourself in a mirror and didn't turn away. You walked not to arrive, but to remember. You were not looking for answers, only quiet. And quiet is what you became. The pages turned without my hand. Slowly. Tenderly. They told me of things I hadn't noticed, how my breath had matched the rhythm of lanterns swaying overhead, how my shadow had disappeared in the room of mirrors, how the sea beneath the glass floor had once mirrored not just images, but my pace of thought. I wasn't reading a book. I was being read. The story flowed on, still unfolding. I saw not endings, but continuations, gentle threads that wound their way into corners of myself I hadn't yet visited. You are not the first to walk this story. But it was never told the same way twice. Because it is you who brings the stillness. It is you who turns the page. The wind shifted slightly. A single page lifted and folded back. The next was blank. But it didn't remain blank. Letters appeared slowly, glowing, curling, forming themselves not from ink, but from feeling. What comes next is not written by the book. It is shaped by the breath you have now calmed. By the silence you have welcomed. By the way your hands hold things gently now, not to grasp but to honor. This is not the end of the book. This is where you begin to write it with your stillness. With your being. I closed my eyes. The breeze touched my face like a sigh from the sea, and I felt the pages beneath my fingertips pulse again. Not faster, not slower. Just, present. When I opened my eyes once more, the book was gone. Not vanished, but absorbed. Into me. Or perhaps, I had never held it. Perhaps it had always held me. The chair remained. The sea remained. The air no longer whispered. It listened. And I realized I could stay here. Not trapped, not bound. But welcomed. As one who had read deeply. As one who had been read in return. The sky turned a softer hue, a palette of colors that had no names. And for the first time, I felt no urge to move forward. No need for another chapter. Because this moment, this breath, this stillness, was itself a story. Not a beginning. Not an ending. Just a space where nothing needed to happen, and that was enough. The waves continued to curl and uncurl. The chair held me gently. And somewhere in the space between sea and sky, a page turned softly, though no book remained.